Today's topic on the NextGEN Q&A series is debt. Now, I don't even have to tell you, the general rule on debt is less is more, right? So we all know we should have less debts as opposed to more, but simple fact is, in our world, to get stuff done, sometimes you gotta take on debt, right? So student loans, credit cards, auto loans, mortgages. Borrowing is a simple fact of adult life. So you need to know the basics of what entails, what goes into borrowing. So if you find yourself in a situation where you deem it necessary or important to borrow money, I want you to keep this concept in mind. It's this idea of total cost of borrowing. Because of course, there is a cost of borrowing money for whatever reason, right? So when you go to get a loan for whatever purpose, keep the following three variables in mind. How much money are you borrowing? How long are you going to borrow that money? And how much of an interest rate are you going to be paying? Those three things together will influence your overall cost of borrowing. And it's pretty simple. The longer, the more, and the higher the interest rate, the greater the cost of borrowing. Those three things are going to influence your overall cost of borrowing money. And it's pretty simple. The more money you borrow, the longer you borrow it for, and the higher the interest rate, the greater the overall cost of borrowing will be. And the inverse is true. You borrow less money for less time at a lower interest rate, you're going to have a lower overall cost of borrowing. Now, there could be situations where those are a little different, right? Maybe I have a higher interest rate for a shorter period, or maybe I borrow less for a longer time period, whatever the specifics of your case is. But in general, just keep in mind, if you can lower the amount, lower the time period, and lower the interest rate, you're going to pay less over the life of that loan. So one of those variables maybe is a little fuzzy for you. It's that of interest rates. Okay, you've heard this. I know you've heard, growing up, we always hear interest rates. But what specifically is that? So when you take out a loan, think of the interest rate as the cost of the money, right? So you're going to pay a certain percentage of the borrowed amount to the lender. And so the higher the interest rate is, the more expensive that loan is. The lower the interest rate is, the more cost effective it is. That's as simple as that. Now, an important component of all of this comes down to the simple fact, if someone's lending you money, inherently, they're taking a risk. They don't know you. How do they know you're going to pay that money back? There's got to be this process in place for the lender to get to know you and to understand under what terms are they willing to lend you money. That process is called underwriting. For any type of a loan, you're going to go through this process where you have to submit information about yourself, your background, and in that process, a big variable is going to be your credit score. Credit score is kind of this summation of all these data points about your financial history that gives you a certain score in terms of credit worthiness, the extent to which a lender can trust the fact that you will make those payments. So I mentioned credit score and underwriting in the context of interest rate because a lender is more likely or more willing to lend to you at a lower interest rate, a lower cost to borrow, if you are credit worthy. If you do have a high credit score and if you are more likely to make those payments, they'll make it at a lower interest rate to you. If they feel that you're not credit worthy or you have a lower credit score, then they may be willing to lend to you, but only at a higher interest rate because they're taking on more risk. They want more reward. They want to charge you a higher interest rate to do so. Now, that's the basics of debt, of borrowing that you should know. But you're probably asking yourself another question, which is, how much debt is too much debt? You're like, great, I know interest rates, get it, cost of borrowing, thanks, Seth, but do I have too much debt? Maybe that's another really important question. So I want to give you a couple of rules of thumb on that front, and really it's two ratios, right? Together we call this the 28-36 rule, okay? But it's two different ratios. Let's look at the 28. Right? So 28 really refers to 28% of your gross income maximum spent on housing, right? So let's say you borrow a mortgage, right, to buy a house, right? So you would want to look at the amount of those payments going toward paying that mortgage each and every month. You just want to make sure that payment does not exceed 28% of your gross, that is pre-tax, pre-401k, all that paycheck. Okay, so that's a good rule of thumb there for you on debt related to your housing. situation. 28, 36, the other rule of thumb there is 36% of your gross income. That would be the maximum you would want to have going to housing and all other debt forms, right? So if you add up all of the payments you're making toward housing and credit cards, student loans, auto loans, any other type of debt, you would not want those payments to exceed 36% of your gross income. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't know how much of my paycheck goes toward debt because I don't have a budget, you probably need to start a budget. Right? We have another video that can help you kind of sort through methods to go about that. And the other thing is, if you find yourself to where like you're exceeding those ratios, 28 and 36% respectively, you probably need to look off some debt payoff strategies. Okay, I got too much debt. What do I do? We have another video on that topic as well. As always, thanks for joining us for this video. If you have other questions related to this topic or any other topic, check out the link below and you can submit your question to get it answered here on the NextGen Q&A series.